can hold them for about 30 seconds and that's it. Mary and Martha is not very interesting. We've heard about it before. We know what it's all about. It's a finished story. If a man asks me what my thesis is about, I say Mary and Martha, and I can see it in their eyes. They're looking for the exit. Get me out of here. This is a woman's story. It has to do with women, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. I think that's one of the problems in confronting this, and one of the very regrettable things about these 4 verses I think have been pretty much overlooked by the men. And you know, I think many times men have 1 Corinthians 2:11, 10 and 11, 12, that passage in mind, which is the famous passage, women do not teach in the church. They are to remain silent. They are not to have authority over the men. And if they truly believe that, then they should not be paying attention to any of the passages in the Bible that feature women, because women are teaching men all over in the Bible. Are they going to cut out those passages? So I'm trying to turn this passage around so it applies to everybody. It's not going to be a woman's passage anymore. It is, I have found things in there that are very applicable, especially even to people in this room. I think that they're really going to enjoy seeing this new perspective on this passage. Do I need to read it? You can read it, right? You want to read it? Okay. Yeah, that one. This is in about the middle of Luke. Jesus is traveling. It's early in Jesus' ministry. He's traveling around in northern Galilee. And before I visited Israel, we'll look at a map of Israel in a bit. This didn't mean a whole lot to me, but now I haven't seen that geography, it means a whole lot more. He's in northern Galilee, and everything surrounding this passage. Right before it is the story of the Good Samaritan. He's nowhere near Jerusalem. I do not think this passage takes place in Bethany near Jerusalem. I think this is earlier in Jesus' ministry. I'll talk about that more. So that's the background. These 4 verses just kind of plop in the middle of nowhere. There's no preparation for them, and there's no follow. And then that's the end of the chapter at the end of this. And as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things. But few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." That's the end of the chapter then. We go into chapter 11, and these 4 verses are what I've worked a great deal on. Yeah, it's a couple of years ago that Jean comes up to me and says, "Why don't we write a book about Mary and Martha?" She feels sorry for Martha. We want to vindicate Martha because Mary is the one who always gets all the attention. There's books out there called, Being Mary in a Martha World. Everything's about Mary. Being Martha in the Mary world. Being Mary. Yeah, okay. And excuse me if I still confuse them. And I had to work up some enthusiasm for it, I must really say. But, it's fun to work with Jean, so, I went along with this. And, we went to Breckenridge, and I started gathering a lot of material and photocopying things from various commentaries and all kinds of books. And gone on Amazon and ordered lots of books. That was fun. I really liked to study. One of the first things we talked about was our first experiences with Mary and Martha as young ladies, as girls. And her experience, of course, is a little different than mine because she was in Scotland, and she was in Scotland, and I was in a cornfield in Iowa, and a little German Reformed church when I first heard this story. And I must admit, I remember liking it quite a bit because my name is Mary, and Mary got it right. So it didn't bother me a whole lot. The lesson was, study your Sunday school lesson first, and then you go out and play. That's the application. As I got older, it was, do your catechism first, then you do your other schoolwork. I mean, this was a strict church. You did catechism first, then you did your regular schoolwork. So I lived with that. I got used to that. I didn't think about it a whole lot. Then I'm a young mother sitting in church, And this is when I began to think this passage does not really set well with me. So imagine, for a lot of you, this is not hard to imagine. You're a young mother. It's 10:30, Sunday morning. You're sitting in church. You've been up since 5:30. Since then, that's when the baby cried. And that was after 5 hours of sleep. Baby cries. You get up, you have a toddler, you've changed them, you have fed them, you have dressed them, you have taken care of your husband, and hopefully he takes care of himself. In my case, he was pretty good at taking care of himself. You get yourself dressed, you get yourself in church, it's 10:30, and you're usually falling asleep. And you just hope that the kids are in a nursery someplace and not crawling over your lap. Except on this day, if the sermon is on Mary and Martha, I'm not falling asleep because I'm getting angry. And so the preacher is telling me that everything I've done this day with these kids, trying to raise my children, is worth less. And I really should have been finding time to study, because that's the more valuable activity. And I'm thinking, this probably isn't really what, is Jesus really teaching me that I'm supposed to stint on my family and these other important things to find time to read my Bible? And I must admit, there were years there where the Bible sat beside my bed and gathered dust. Were those lost years? Were those years not to God's glory? Was I not worshiping? Was I not learning? Okay, that was my first problem with the original interpretation. The traditional, so I'm going on to this slide, the traditional interpretation, I think we all pretty much know. Oh yeah, I found my original book. Look how well worn, I mean the pages are filled out. This is the book that I learned my first Bible stories from, that my mother would read to me from. I like some of them better than others. And there were illustrations. This is the only time we had illustrations in our Bibles. Otherwise, illustrations were not allowed. Here's the Mary and Martha story. Well illustrated. Martha, Mary, or Jesus, Mary talking. Martha's back here frantically sweeping the floor. So I gathered that from the picture. But I don't think that was really taught all that often. This is pretty good here at Peter's sinking in the water. I know that made an impression on me when I was little. So that's the traditional interpretation. You know it. More recent, I know I heard a sermon in Montview in August on, well, Martha and Mary. Martha's got it right. Mary's got it right. You can serve by doing your day-to-day things. You can worship in that way. You can be washing dishes and thinking about the things of God. That is worship as well. Insights come to you as you're driving. You don't always have to have your nose in some kind of literature, the Bible, the commentaries. And that's been coming out more often. And it's good. It's a step in the right direction. The one positive from both of these interpretations is that women are affirmed in study. Jesus says it's okay for Mary to sit at his feet and study. And that is a step in the right direction, because I think for centuries, women probably, well, first of all, they weren't able to read. They just probably weren't given the time. Or maybe they didn't have the brains to be able to absorb this kind of information. Theology, heaven forbid, you know. So that's a good thing. The problem is, and I start reading the more liberal theologians, is that, yes, women are studying, but are they doing anything with what they're studying? No, they're not. They're not going out and preaching. They're not going out and teaching. Apparently they're keeping it to themselves, or maybe to a very limited in the household type audience, or to their own children or something, you know. So that is a major problem with the traditional interpretation. Okay, I covered some of this. First of all, it's women's lessons. Okay, so Irv, David, do I still have you, Clem? Dan, still have you with us? I know, Rick is with us. So, he's got to grade this. He'll pay attention. So, it's got women's names there, Mary and Martha, so it doesn't have anything to do with Mike and Mark, and they're out to lunch. It devalues